What's up, Subi Nation? DJ here with Subi Bros, and today we're taking a look at the Perrin cold air intake system for the 20 and 15 and up WRX. This kit is specific for the WRX with the FA20 motor. There is a different item available for your STI if you would like, but today we're just taking a look at this unit. So we're gonna go ahead and dive into the parts that come with it, and then we're gonna show you the install. So to start, you have your hardware kit. This comes with a little bracket, of course, various nuts and bolts to mount the system. Comes with a license plate frame, instructions, and also a mass airflow sensor extension cable. You have your heat shield, which is finished in wrinkle red along with the intake tube. This kit is also available in a wrinkle black finish as well. The heat shield is designed to just keep engine heat away from the filter. Then we have the intake tube. And the Perrin intake tube is a little bit unique in that it is precision designed with the MAF placement and the size of the tubing to be optimized to work with your factory tune on your car. So running this without a tune is not going to cause any check engine lights and will work just fine on your factory tune. So down here you'll mount this tube onto your factory inlet hose, and up here is where the filter is going to mount. And then of course we have a few mounting points to keep the entire intake system in place. Moving on to the filter itself. This is a much larger than the factory panel filter. It's also a dry flow air filter, so it is reusable for the life of the car. So that's an extra benefit. You won't be buying panel filters anymore. This comes with a little trim piece that is for the heat shield, which we'll show you in the install. So you might be asking yourself, why would I want a cold air intake? Well, there's basically two reasons people want a cold air intake or go with a cold air intake. One is that it increases the flow potential over the factory system. As you'll see in the video, this filter has a lot more surface area than the factory panel filter, which obviously allows for more flow potential. The second reason to go with the cold air intake system is really around sound. A lot of people really enjoy the sound of the cold air intake system. When you replace the factory pipe with a metal pipe, it just creates more audible engine sounds. You mostly hear the turbo spooling a lot louder, and you can also hear the bypass valve opening and closing, which gives you sort of the blow-off valve noise. So that's the Perrin cold air intake system, and now we're gonna go ahead and get to the install. All right, so we obviously got our hood popped, and so we're gonna be removing the intake duct here, and then ultimately our goal is to get the air box off, which we're going to do by removing the bolts here, here, here. We got to remove this bracket, the bolt down there, which we'll show you guys, and then we're going to remove the rest of the intake assembly and obviously replace it with the cold air intake assembly. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Before you begin, make sure to disconnect the negative side of the battery. All right, so to get the intake duct off, we're going to remove these two clips with the flathead. All right, we're going to remove this 10mm bolt in these two as well. Before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and disconnect the MAF cable. We're now going to remove the 10mm bolt that is located on the side of the airbox assembly. So now before we can remove the factory airbox, we have to disconnect the inlet hose. It's going to be kind of hard to see here, but there's an 8mm hose clamp holding it on the back side here. So you can either use your 8mm or a flathead screwdriver. All right, so now that we've got the hose clamp loosened up, we're gonna remove the factory hose here. Now that the factory air box is removed, we're going to need to remove the rest of the air intake hose assembly, which can be done by reaching down into the bottom of the engine bay where you'll see a hose clamp that attaches to the inlet hose. You'll want to go ahead and loosen that using the 8mm ratchet or a flathead screwdriver. Before you completely remove the stock inlet hose, there's a bracket located on the side of the inlet hose towards the front of the vehicle. So it's right under this beam here. You'll want to go ahead and grab a 10mm and loosen the bracket that is holding the inlet hose on. Once you've got the bracket nut removed, you're ready to pull the intake tube. Here you can see where the bracket was being held on with the nut. After you remove the inlet hose, you need to finish removing the hardware that was holding the intake hose onto the bracket underneath the bumper beam. So as you can see, there's a little rubber bracket that mounts down there. You'll need to make sure this comes out either with your intake or after, as we've done in this video. Here's another image that'll help you visualize the bracket. If you're having trouble with it, you can always remove the splash guard and get at it from underneath the vehicle. All right, we're going to now begin to prep the Perrin intake for installation. The first step is going to be removing the mass airflow sensor from the factory airbox. We're now going to install the mass airflow sensor on the Perrin intake using the supplied screws. We're now going to assemble the upper mounting bracket for the intake using the supplied M8 bolts and washers. Take note of the orientation. You can see that one side of the bracket is slotted, allowing this to move, and the other side is in a fixed position. Make sure that you install it as shown here with the bolt, washer, and nut. We're now ready to install the intake tube. We're going to just slide it into the factory inlet hose at the bottom and align the bracket. Go ahead and snug down the hose clamp, mounting the intake to the inlet hose so that you don't have as much trouble with it slipping off. You're now going to install the bracket on this bottommost hole on the chassis side by using the bolt through one side with a washer and a washer and nut to secure the other side. We're now going to install the lower bracket hardware. That includes the M6 bolt, 3 washers, spacer, and nut that came in your hardware kit. We're going to go ahead and show you guys a picture of what it looks like assembled now. Of course, you can access that from the bottom side by removing the splash guard, but you can also install it perfectly fine from above, like we are here. Now that we have our lower bracket secured, we're going to go ahead and snug down the upper bracket. Now that we have the intake secure, we're going to install the MAF extension and connect it to the MAF. We're now going to get ready to install the heat shield. To do that, we'll start by removing the ground chassis bolt that's located just next to the engine on the intake side. Now that you've removed the ground bolt, you need to remove the 2 screws on the side of the ECU. We're now going to set the heat shield in place and then reinstall the screws on the ECU. Next, we're going to reinstall the ground wire. Make sure you install it in the correct order. It should go bolt, ground cable, washer, then the heat shield, and then of course, which the bolt then threads into the chassis. We're now going to finish snugging down the screws on the ECU. Go ahead and install the rubber seal across the top of the heat shield. We're now ready for the final step, which is to install the air filter. Now for the final step, reinstall your intake duct on the front of the car. Reconnect the negative terminal. And that concludes the install of the Perrin cold air intake for the 2015 and up WRX. Make sure to go ahead and start your car before you need to drive it to make sure that there's no check engine lights and that you've properly reconnected the MAF. If you like this, give it a like, subscribe for more content, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and of course visit subibros.com to purchase. We'll catch you next time.